She had no one left to call, but the Mafia boss gave her his gun, his bed, and his heart. The slap at the greasy swinging door was the only severance pay Haley Trent received. "And don't bother asking for a reference," Sal barked, his face still mottled red from her shove. The alley behind the diner smelled of old grease and wet cardboard, a stench that clung to her thin polyester uniform. Haley's palm still stung, not from the force of her push, but from the violation that caused it. Sal's hand, damp and thick, sliding from the small of her back down to the curve of her hip. It wasn't the first time. It was just the first time she'd had absolutely nothing left to lose by fighting back. "You'll be back," he sneered, wiping his hands on his apron. "Girls like you always come back." Haley said nothing. She just pulled her threadbare sweater tighter, the fabric catching on the name badge pinned over her heart. She didn't have the energy to unpin it. She just walked, leaving the clatter of plates and the smell of burnt coffee behind her. The November wind in Oakmore City was a brutal thing. It didn't just chill, it excavated, finding every gap in her clothing, every crack in her resolve. Her 10-hour shift had netted her $45 in tips. Crumpled in her pocket, it wasn't enough for the electric bill, let alone the rent, let alone the crushing, astronomical medical debt her father had left as his only inheritance. But it was enough for bus fare and maybe some instant noodles. The bus ride was a blur of smeared windows and coughing passengers. She got off at her stop, the building's broken security door looming. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor, a one-bedroom box that always smelled faintly of mildew and her neighbor's boiling cabbage. She knew something was wrong before she even reached the landing. Her door was open, just an inch, a dark slice in the dim hallway. Her breath hitched. The 3 locks she fastidiously checked every morning were splintered. "No," she whispered. The word was smoke in the cold air. She pushed the door. It scraped against the floor. The word wasn't robbed. The word was violated. They hadn't just taken things. They had destroyed them. The cheap particle board dresser was overturned, its drawers shattered. The cushions on her secondhand couch were slashed, vomiting yellow foam in the kitchenette. The bag of flour she'd been nursing for a month was ripped open, coating the linoleum in a ghostly white powder. But they weren't looking for flour. She ran to her bedroom, her heart a cold stone in her throat. The mattress was flipped, the small, loose floorboard beneath her bed, the one she thought was so clever, was pried open. The envelope was gone. It held $212. Every cent she had in the world, saved over 6 months, hidden from the loan sharks who had started calling, their voices polite at first, then laced with a casual menace. Haley sank to her knees, her hand landing in the spilled flour. It wasn't just money. It was her last escape route. It was the bus ticket out of Oakmore, the deposit on a room somewhere new. It was the thin, fraying thread of hope she'd been clinging to. Now it was gone. She didn't cry. The shock was too cold, too deep. It was a numbness that settled in her bones. She sat there for a long time, the white dust clinging to her black uniform pants. Then her phone buzzed in her pocket. The screen was a spiderweb of cracks, but the name was clear. Ty Callan. Her stomach hollowed out. He was supposed to be gone. Skipped town after a parole violation. She hadn't heard from him in 8 months. Her fingers trembled so badly she almost dropped the phone. She opened the message. "Heard you lost your job. Baby." "Tough break. I always told you you'd end up with nothing without me. Guess what? I'm back in town, and I've been watching you." A second message pinged immediately after. "You look so pretty when you're desperate. Stay put. I'm coming to see you." That's what broke her. The numbness shattered, replaced by a white-hot, acidic terror that sent her scrambling to her feet. Ty, the smashed locks, the destroyed room. It wasn't the loan sharks. It was him. This was his signature. Total destruction, the assertion of power, the promise of more. He hadn't found her money. He was just enjoying the prelude. She grabbed her purse. Empty. And her keys. She didn't take a coat. She didn't pack a bag. She just ran. She ran down the stairs, bursting out onto the street, colliding with a man walking his dog. She didn't apologize. She just kept moving, her worn sneakers pounding the pavement. She had no destination. She just knew she couldn't be there when he arrived. The sun had long since set, and Oakmore City transformed. The commuters were gone, replaced by hollow-eyed figures in doorways and predators cruising the streets. Haley walked for hours. She walked until her feet were numb, until the cold had settled so deep she thought her blood might be freezing. She had no one. Her father was gone. Her mother had left when she was 6. The few friends she'd had were scattered by the poverty and sickness that had defined her last 2 years. There were no shelters that would take her at this hour without a referral, no friends' couches to crash on. She was an island, and the tide was rising. Her aimless path had taken her downtown, past the theater district and into the iron-gated enclave of the city's elite. Here, the streetlights were warmer, the pavement cleaner, and the clubs were different. She found herself standing across from Il Corvo, the Crow. Everyone in Oakmore knew the name. It was sleek, black, and exclusive. It was owned by the Rocco Syndicate, a name spoken in whispers, a shadow government that ran the docks, the unions, and everything in between. The club was a fortress of dark glass and polished mahogany, a velvet rope holding back a small, well-dressed crowd. Haley just stood there, staring. She was the ghost at the feast, invisible in her stained uniform and matted hair. She was so cold, so tired. She just wanted to sit down for 5 minutes. She drifted closer, drawn by the faint pulse of music and the light spilling from the doorway. She leaned against the brickwork of the alley next to the entrance, just trying to catch her breath. "Hey, you—" A mountain in a black suit detached itself from the door, the bouncer. He was massive, with a thick neck and a face that looked like it had been used to stop pucks. "You can't loiter here," he grunted, jabbing a thick finger. "This ain't a homeless shelter. Get lost." Haley flinched. I need a minute." Her voice was a dry rasp. "I said, get lost," he repeated, stepping closer. He saw her uniform, her exhausted face, and his expression curled in disgust. He put a heavy hand on her shoulder and shoved. "Move it, stray!" The shove was hard, knocking her off balance. She stumbled, her weak ankle twisting, and she fell against the cold brick wall, her head cracking against the mortar. Pain flared, bright and sharp, behind her eyes. "That's enough, Marco." The voice was not loud. It was quiet, deep, and laced with a gravelly authority that cut through the night air like a razor. The bouncer, Marco, froze. His hand, which had been reaching for her again, dropped to his side. He turned, his entire demeanor shifting from predator to supplicant. "Mr. Rocco, sir, I was just cleaning up." A man stepped out of the club's shadow. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal suit so impeccably tailored it seemed molded to him. He wasn't handsome in the way of movie stars. His features were too harsh, his nose aquiline, his jaw sharp enough to cut, but it was his eyes that held her. They were dark, almost black, and they held an absolute, unnerving stillness. This was Damien Rocco, the boss. He didn't look at his bouncer. His gaze was fixed on Haley, who was sliding down the wall, the world tilting. He assessed her in a single, sweeping glance, the cheap uniform, the bruise forming on her cheek from where she hit the wall, the raw terror in her eyes. It was not a kind look. It was analytical, like a hawk spotting a field mouse. "She doesn't look like trouble," Damien said, his voice a low rumble. "She looks like she's at the end of her rope. Sir, she's nobody." "Go back to the door, Marco." "Yes, Mr. Rocco." Marco retreated, chastened. Damien Rocco turned his full attention to Haley. He took a step closer. She tried to push herself up, to get away. This was worse than Ty, worse than the bouncer. This was the apex predator. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Away," she managed, her throat tight. "You're bleeding." He motioned to his own temple. Haley lifted a trembling hand to her head. Her fingers came back dark. "I'm fine." She tried to stand, but her legs buckled. He didn't offer a hand, he just watched her struggle. "You're a terrible liar." He looked up and down the empty, cold street. "There's nothing for you out here tonight but trouble." He pulled a phone from his pocket and murmured something into it. A few seconds later, a black sedan, sleek and silent as a shark, pulled up to the curb. "Get in," he said. It wasn't a request. Haley's pride, The last stupid, stubborn thing she had, flared up. "I don't take rides from strangers." A flicker of something, maybe amusement, maybe impatience, crossed his features. A man sends his bouncer to throw you in the gutter. Another man offers you a ride out of it. You're afraid of the wrong stranger. He opened the back door. The car smelled of leather and power. "I'll give you a ride. A place to sleep. No questions." "Why?" she whispered, mistrust coiling in her gut. "Because I don't like messes on my doorstep," he said coldly. "And you, Ragazza, are a mess. Get in the car, or take your chances with whatever's chasing you." He knew. He saw it. He saw the hunted look in her eyes. She looked down the dark street, imagining Ty's face, the glint of his smile. Then she looked at the open car door. One was a monster she knew. The other was a monster she didn't. But the car was warm. She made her choice. As she moved, the exhaustion, the hunger, and the blow to her head converged. The pavement rushed up to meet her. The world didn't just go gray, it snapped to black. She woke to the smell of lemons and old books. Her first thought was, "This isn't my apartment." Her second was panic. She sat up, the world spinning, and found herself in a bed so large it could have fit her entire bedroom. The sheets were not polyester. They were heavy. Impossibly soft cotton, the color of cream. The room was vast, dominated by a floor-to-ceiling window that looked out over the entirety of Oakmore City, a carpet of glittering, indifferent diamonds. She was in a penthouse. "You fainted!" She flinched, pulling the sheet up to her chin. Damien Rocco was standing by the window, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He was still in his suit, but his tie was gone and his collar was unbuttoned. "Where am I?" "My guest room," he said, taking a sip. "You hit your head. My doctor looked at you while you were out. You have a mild concussion, you're dehydrated, you're malnourished. Otherwise, you're fine." It was a clinical, detached assessment. Haley looked down. She was still in her uniform, but her shoes were gone. Your doctor?" "He's discreet." Damien walked away from the window, not toward her, but toward a large mahogany dresser. He opened a drawer. "You were talking in your sleep," mumbling a name. "Ty." Haley stopped breathing. "You kept saying, 'He's coming, don't let him find me.'" Damien pulled something from the drawer. He turned. It was a gun. It was small, black and dense. He held it out to her. "Handle first." Haley recoiled, pressing herself against the headboard. What is that?" "It's a .38 caliber SIG. It's simple to use. The safety is here." His voice was flat, instructional, as if he were teaching her to use a new appliance. "I'm assuming Ty is the reason your apartment was destroyed and you were running through my neighborhood with nothing but the clothes on your back." She couldn't speak. She just stared at the weapon. "This is my home," he said, his voice hardening slightly. "No one will get to you in here. Not Ty, not the loan sharks you owe." Her head snapped up. "How did you—" "Nah. I had my people look into you while you were sleeping. Haley Trent. It wasn't hard. You're an open book of bad luck. Orphaned, drowning in your father's debt. An abusive ex with a record. Fired this afternoon." He laid the gun on the nightstand, a cold black paperweight on the polished wood. I don't want that," she stammered, looking at the gun. "I don't know how to use it." He met her gaze, and for the first time, his coldness cracked. Underneath was something harder, something ancient and weary. "You point it at the thing that scares you, and you pull the trigger. It's easier than running." He placed the gun on the nightstand, next to a glass of water. "You don't have to run anymore." He walked to the door. "The bathroom is through there. There are clothes in the closet. They'll be too big, but they're clean. The door locks from the inside. No one will bother you." He paused, his hand on the doorknob. "Eat the food on the tray. You need it." He left, closing the door with a quiet, heavy click. Haley stared at the door, her heart hammering. This was insane. She was in a Mafia boss's penthouse. He knew everything about her. He'd given her a gun. Men like him didn't give. They traded. She looked at the gun. She thought of Sal's wet hands. She thought of the splintered door. She thought of Ty's text message. "I'm coming to see you." Her hand, trembling, reached out. The steel was cold, but it was heavy. It was solid. It was the first solid thing she had held in months. She wrapped her fingers around the grip. She didn't put her finger on the trigger, but she held it. She held it, and she drank the water. She ate the sandwich on the tray, and then, still holding the gun, she fell back into the pillows, pulling the heavy comforter up to her chin. Sleep came, but it wasn't restful. It was a dark, swirling vortex of memory. Sal's face, the splintering wood, and then Ty. She was back in her old apartment. He had her pinned against the wall. His hand was not on her hip, it was on her throat. She could smell the cheap whiskey on his breath, see the terrifying, possessive glee in his eyes. "You think you can leave me, baby? You're mine." The pressure tightened. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't scream. Her lungs were on fire. Haley woke with a strangled gasp, bolting upright in the bed. She was in the penthouse. The sheets were tangled around her legs. The gun was still in her hand. Her heart was rabbiting against her ribs so hard it hurt. She was safe. It was a dream. But the fear lingered, thick and suffocating. She needed air. She needed to know the door was locked. She slipped out of bed, the gun still clutched in her right hand. She padded silently across the thick carpet to the door. Her hand was on the brass knob when she noticed the light. A dim, golden light spilled from under the door. She peered through the old-fashioned keyhole. It offered only a sliver of the hallway outside. She cracked the door, just a fraction of an inch. Her breath held tight in her chest. Damien Rocco was sitting on a low, upholstered couch across the hall, directly facing her door. He was still dressed in his dark pants and white shirt, the sleeves now rolled up, revealing strong, tattooed forearms. A half-empty glass of whiskey sat on the floor beside him, and he was not sleeping. He was guarding her door. As she watched, his head lifted, his dark eyes seeming to pierce the shadows, meeting hers directly through the tiny crack. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just held her gaze. A new, strange feeling unfolded in her chest. It wasn't fear. It wasn't gratitude. It was a profound, shocking, and terrifying sense of stillness. He had told her she didn't have to run. He meant it. Haley slowly, silently, pushed the door closed. She turned the heavy brass lock. The click echoed in the silent room. She walked back to the bed, placed the gun on the nightstand, and slid under the covers. She didn't dream again. The sun woke her. Not the sound of traffic. Haley opened her eyes to a room bathed in pale gold light. For a full 10 seconds, she had no idea where she was. The panic came first, a cold jolt that had her clutching the sheets. Then memory returned. The club, the fall, the gun on the nightstand. She looked. The gun was still there. The glass of water, the empty plate, and the door was, as she had left it, locked from the inside. She got up slowly, her body aching. The concussion left a dull throb behind her right eye. She padded to the bathroom, a cavern of white marble and glass that was larger than her entire apartment. In the mirror, she looked like a refugee. Her hair was matted, her uniform rumpled, and a long, dark scrape marked her temple. In the closet, as he had promised, were clothes. They were not new, but they were high quality. A pair of soft gray sweatpants, a thick cashmere sweater the color of oatmeal, and a black t-shirt. They all belonged to a woman, but a woman with at least 4 inches and 20 pounds on Haley. Still, they were clean. She showered, the hot water stinging her cold skin, and dressed in the borrowed comfort. When she finally found the courage to unlock the door, the penthouse was silent. The man from the hallway, Damien, was gone. The space was breathtaking and terrifyingly cold. It was less a home than a statement. The floors were polished dark wood. The furniture was all sharp angles and expensive-looking fabrics in shades of gray and black. The walls were almost entirely glass, offering a 180-degree view of Oakmore that made her feel like she was floating. She drifted into the kitchen, a stainless steel fortress that looked like it had never been used to cook a meal. A note was on the counter, next to a high-end coffee maker. The refrigerator is stocked. "Make yourself at home." It was not signed. He doesn't like people in his space. Haley spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. A man was leaning against the far entryway, watching her. He was younger than Damien, maybe in his early 30s, with a sharp suit, an easy smile, and the most observant, merciless eyes she had ever seen. He held a tablet in one hand. "You must be the stray," he said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "I'm Luca Barone." Haley just nodded, her hand instinctively going to the pocket of the sweatpants, as if the gun were still there. "Mister? Rocco's second in command," Haley whispered, identifying him. His name was as well known as Damien's, but where Damien was the shadow, Luca was the public face, the negotiator, the blade, among other things. Luca walked into the kitchen, moving with a fluid grace. He opened the refrigerator, pulled out a bottle of water, and tossed it to her. She caught it out of sheer reflex. "He's in meetings." "He'll be back this afternoon." I should go," Haley said, her voice sounding small in the vast room. Luca's smile tightened. "And go where? Exactly? Back to the apartment Ty Callan tossed? Back to the diner Sal runs?" She froze. "You know. It's my job to know." He leaned against the steel counter, crossing his arms. His friendly demeanor was gone, replaced by a clinical intensity. "Let me give you some advice. Haley, I've worked for Damien Rocco for 15 years. In that time, I have never seen him bring anyone here. Not business, not women, not ever. This place is his sanctuary. You're the first." "I didn't ask to be here," she said, defensive. "That's probably the only reason you are here," Luca said sharply. "He doesn't do this. He doesn't save strays. Whatever he sees in you, whatever debt he thinks he's paying to the universe, I don't care, but I care about him. So do not mess with his kindness. Do not mistake this," he gestured around the penthouse, "for a blank check. He just saved your life. Don't make him regret it." "I don't want anything from him," she insisted, her pride stinging. "Good," Luca replied. "Then we understand each other." Just then, the private elevator chimed, the stainless steel doors opened, and Damien Rocco walked in. Shrugging out of his heavy wool overcoat, he looked tired. He nodded at Luca. Then his eyes found Haley. "You're awake," he said. It was a statement, not a question. "Your guest is just about to have some breakfast," Luca said smoothly, his smile returning. "I'll be in the study, boss." He walked out, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. Damien loosened his tie. He looked at Haley, who was still clutching the water bottle like a life raft. "Luca briefs you?" "He told me not to be a problem," Haley said, lifting her chin. A ghost of a smile touched Damien's mouth. "Good advice." He walked to the coffee machine. "You can stay here until you figure things out." "Figure what out?" "Where to go next? A new city, a new job, whatever it is. You can't do it from a gutter." He poured a cup of coffee. Black. "But I have rules." Haley waited. "Rule 1. You don't lie to me. Ever. I ask you a question. You give me a straight answer." He took a sip, his dark eyes fixed on her over the rim of the cup. "Rule 2. No running. You're not a prisoner, but if you leave, you don't come back. This protection ends at the elevator door. If you walk out, you're on your own." He paused, his gaze intensifying. "Rule 3. You do not go sneaking into dangerous territory. That means you don't go back to your apartment. You don't contact anyone from your old life. You don't go looking for trouble. Trouble found you. I found you. The chain ends there. Understand?" She nodded. "I understand, but I can't just stay here. I can't let you pay for me." "I'm not," he said. "Consider it a debt settled for the mess on my sidewalk." "No." Her voice was firmer now. The fear was receding, replaced by the familiar, stubborn burn of her pride. "I won't be a charity case. Mr. Rocco, I'm not one of those women." Damien studied her for a long moment, his head tilted. "Fine. You want to work?" "Yes." "You have any skills besides slinging hash?" "I was 2 years into an accounting degree before my father got sick," she said. "I'm good with numbers." Damien seemed to consider this. He finished his coffee and set the cup down with a quiet click. "I might know a place, but it's on my terms. You work. You come straight back here. You don't talk to anyone, you don't need to. A car will take you and pick you up. That's the deal. Deal, she said, relieved to feel solid ground under her feet, even if it was his. Good. Luca will arrange it. The job was at a small, dusty antique shop in the old Italian district, a place called Curio Company. It was run by an elderly woman named Mrs. Moretti, who seemed perpetually half asleep and smelled of lavender and mothballs. The shop itself was a quiet, dimly lit place, filled with the ghosts of other people's lives, old furniture, tarnished silver, and portraits of stern-looking ancestors. Haley's office was a cramped, windowless room in the back, filled with filing cabinets and stacks of leather-bound ledgers that went back 30 years. It was perfect. Her job was simple. Transfer the handwritten sales logs from the ledgers into a modern computer accounting system. It was tedious, meticulous work, and she loved it. For 6 hours a day, she was just Haley Trent, the bookkeeper. She wasn't the orphan, the debtor, or the runaway. She was just a woman entering numbers, a black car, different every day but always driven by a silent man in a dark suit. Would pick her up at 9 in the morning and be waiting outside at precisely 5 in the afternoon. She never knew that Mrs. Moretti was Luca Barone's aunt, or that the antique shop was one of the Rocco Syndicate's oldest and most legitimate-looking fronts. She'd been working there for almost 2 weeks. She was starting to feel human again. She had a routine. She and Damien coexisted in the vast penthouse with a strange, silent accord. They rarely spoke. She would wake up and he would be gone. She would come home, make herself a small dinner in the sterile kitchen, and retreat to her room. Sometimes, late at night, she would hear the chime of the elevator, his heavy footsteps, the clink of a glass. He never breached her solitude. He never knocked on her locked door. One evening, Mrs. Moretti asked her to stay late. A large estate sale had come in, and the old woman needed help cataloging the items before the appraisers arrived the next morning. "Just an hour or two, dear," she'd requested. Her wrinkled hands fluttering, Haley agreed. She called the car service Damien had insisted she use, a number on a simple black card he'd given her, and pushed her pickup time to 8 o'clock. At 7:50, she finished the last entry, Mrs. Moretti had already locked the front of the shop and shuffled out through a back delivery door. Haley gathered her things, turned off the single green-shaded lamp on her desk, and let herself out the same back door into the narrow, cobblestone alley. The alley was dark. The only light came from a single, flickering bulb above a neighboring restaurant's dumpster. Her car was not there yet. She pulled her thin coat tighter. Damien had given her a small advance on her salary, and she'd bought a new coat, but it was no match for the biting November air. She stood under the light, trying to make herself visible, her breath pluming in front of her, a sound, a metal trash can lid scraping on the pavement. Haley froze. Hello? Silence. She told herself it was a rat. The alley was full of them. She looked toward the street, impatient for the headlights of her car. Then, 2 shadows detached themselves from the darkness by the dumpster. They were tall, dressed in black hoodies, and wearing ski masks. Haley's blood turned to ice. She didn't scream. She didn't move. She just stared, her mind blank with a primal, paralyzing terror. Well, one of them rasped. His voice was muffled by the mask, but the sneer was evident. "Look what we found! It's the right one," the other one said, his voice younger, more nervous. "That's her." Haley started to back away, her hand fumbling in her purse. Not for the gun. Damien had forbidden her to take it out of the penthouse. She was fumbling for her phone. "Don't bother," the first man said, taking a step toward her. He pulled a thick, black zip tie from his pocket. "You're coming with us. The boss wants to talk to you." "What boss?" Haley said, her voice a reedy whisper. "I don't have any money." "Oh, he's not after your money, sweetheart. He's after his—" The man lunged. Haley screamed and threw her purse at his head. He batted it away and grabbed her wrist, his grip like a steel vise. He yanked her toward him. She fought, kicking and twisting, but he was too strong. He wrapped an arm around her waist, lifting her off her feet. The other man moved to grab her legs. Suddenly, a black sedan. The same black sedan she had been waiting for, screeched around the corner into the alley, its high beams flashing on, blinding them. It hadn't been late. It had been waiting. Before the car had even stopped, 2 men were out. They were not the silent drivers. These were different men, dressed in sharp suits, moving with a speed that was terrifying. The man holding Haley cursed and dropped her. She fell hard onto the cobblestones, the impact knocking the wind out of her. She heard a sickening, wet thud, a short, brutal cry. When she looked up, the man who had grabbed her was on the ground, unmoving. One of Damien's men was standing over him, calmly adjusting his cuff. The second masked man had turned to run. The other of Damien's men did not chase him. He moved with an athlete's grace, intercepting him, and delivered a single, devastating punch to the man's throat. The man collapsed, gagging, clawing at his neck. It was over in less than 5 seconds. One of Damien's men opened the back door of the car. The other hauled Haley to her feet, his grip impersonal but firm. "Get in the car, Miss Trent," he said, his voice completely calm. "What? Who?" she stammered, looking at the 2 men on the ground. "Get in the car, now." She was bundled into the back seat. The car peeled out of the alley, leaving the 2 masked men in the darkness. The ride back to the penthouse was silent. Haley was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. The driver did not speak. When the elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse, Damien was waiting. He was not wearing a suit. He was in a black t-shirt and dark pants, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked at her, his eyes sweeping over her disheveled state, the new rip in her coat, the raw scrape on her elbow from the fall. His face was a mask of cold fury. "Who were they?" His voice was lethally quiet. I don't know," she whispered. "They were wearing masks. They said their boss wanted to talk to me." Damien's jaw clenched. The muscles in his neck stood out. "They were watching you. They knew you were working late. They were waiting." He slammed the whiskey glass down on a table. The sound made her jump. "I didn't tell anyone. You didn't have to," he roared, and she flinched, taking a step back. It was the first time he had ever raised his voice to her. The sound was terrifying. He saw her fear and visibly fought for control. He stalked over to the window, his back to her. "I put you in a safe place. I put my men on you. How did they find you?" They said he wasn't after my money." Haley said, her voice trembling. "He was after his—" Damien turned around slowly. "What did you just say?" "That's what the man said. He's after his money." The coldness in Damien's eyes was absolute. "My first rule, Haley, no lies. Who are you in debt to?" She looked at the floor. The shame was a hot, suffocating blanket. "Who?" he demanded. "A loan shark. My father. He borrowed money for experimental treatments from a group called the Fletcher Street Crew. And the other one," Damien said, his voice dropping, "the man from your nightmares, Ty Callan." Haley finally looked at him, her eyes flooding with tears she refused to let fall. "He was my ex-boyfriend. He put my father in touch with the Fletcher crew. He gets a cut. When my father died, the debt became mine. Ty said I could pay it off. Other ways. I refused. I left. He got sent away for a parole violation. But he's back. That was his message. The one. The night you found me. It was Ty who broke into my apartment." The confession hung in the air, raw and ugly. Damien said nothing for a full minute. He simply watched her, his expression unreadable. The rage was gone, replaced by that unnerving, predatory stillness. He had the missing pieces. He walked past her, toward the elevator. "Where are you going?" she asked, a new fear rising. "To handle it," he said. He pressed the button. "Damien, wait," she said, using his first name for the first time. "You don't understand. He's crazy, and the Fletcher crew, they're dangerous." The elevator doors opened. He stepped in and turned to face her. "They just put their hands on what is mine. Haley, they don't get to be dangerous anymore." The doors slid shut. Haley was left alone in the vast, silent room. She sank onto one of the expensive gray couches, the adrenaline ebbing, leaving her hollow and sick. He was going to start a war. For her, She did not know when she fell asleep, but she woke up hours later, stiff and cold, on the couch. The penthouse was still dark. She had no idea what time it was. She got up and went to the kitchen, desperate for a glass of water. Her hands were still shaking. She felt useless. A pawn, a mess that he was now cleaning up, just as he'd cleaned up the men in the alley. She saw a block of cheese in the refrigerator, a loaf of bread. She could at least do something. She could make food. She was so tired of being useless. She pulled out a frying pan, her movements clumsy with exhaustion. She turned on the gas stove, the blue flame hissing to life. She was trying to make a simple grilled cheese, anything, normal. She was thinking about the man's voice. "You're coming with us." She was thinking about Damien's face. They don't get to be dangerous anymore. She was so lost in the memory that she didn't realize the butter had started to smoke. She dropped the sandwich into the pan, and hot, burning grease spat up, splattering her hand and forearm. Haley cried out, a sharp intake of breath, and dropped the spatula. The pain was secondary. It was the failure, the sheer, pathetic incompetence. She could not even make a sandwich. She could not keep a job. She could not protect herself. A sob tore itself from her throat, a ragged, ugly sound. She leaned against the counter, clutching her burning hand, and finally, after weeks of holding it in, she broke. The tears came, hot and silent, a flood of shame, fear, and utter exhaustion. "Ha!" She flinched. Damien was standing in the kitchen entryway. He was back. He looked unchanged, his suit immaculate, not a hair out of place. He saw her, hunched over, crying, clutching her hand in 2 long strides. He was at her side. He didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't ask about the men. He saw her hand. "The faucet," he commanded, his voice rough. He took her arm and thrust her hand under a stream of cold water. The shock of the cold and his sudden, firm touch made her gasp. "You're fine," he murmured, his voice low. He kept her hand under the water, his other hand coming up to rest on her shoulder, holding her steady as she trembled. "It's just a burn. You're fine." He held her there for a long time. When the stinging subsided, he gently turned off the water and reached for a clean dish towel, wrapping it softly around her reddened skin. "There's a first aid kit in the bathroom," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "I have one here," he said. He guided her to a bar stool and opened a low cabinet she had never looked in. It was a full, professional medical kit. He pulled out burn cream and sterile gauze. He sat on the stool next to her, taking her hand in his. His hands were large, his fingers calloused and strong, but his touch was incredibly gentle. He was silent as he applied the cream, his focus entirely on her skin. Haley watched him. His dark, thick eyelashes, the severe line of his jaw, the way his brow furrowed in concentration. He was the most dangerous man she had ever met, and he was tending to her burn like she was made of glass. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, the tears still tracking down her cheeks. He didn't look up from wrapping the gauze. "Doing what? Stopping you from getting an infection?" All of this. The job. The men in the alley, guarding my door. You don't even know me." He finished with the gauze, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. He finally raised his eyes to hers. The stillness in them was gone, replaced by something deep and turbulent. "I know you," he said, his voice a low gravel. "I know you were fired for defending yourself. I know you slept with a gun in your hand because you were more afraid of your dreams than you were of me. I know you insist on working for a paycheck you do not need because your pride is the only thing you have left." His gaze dropped to her mouth. The air in the kitchen became thick, electric. "And I know," he breathed, "that you haven't stopped trembling since I brought you here." His hand, the one not holding her bandaged one, came up. His thumb, rough from calluses, brushed the tear track on her cheek. Haley stopped breathing. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She did not. She was trapped, not by his strength, but by the sheer, desperate need to feel something other than fear. His mouth touched hers. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a kiss of raw, banked-up tension. It was hesitant and demanding all at once, a question and an answer. His lips were firm, tasting faintly of whiskey on a cold winter night. It was a grounding, possessive pressure that sent a jolt straight through her, pushing back the cold, pushing back the terror. His other hand moved from her shoulder to the back of her neck, his fingers threading into her hair, holding her steady. She kissed him back, her free hand coming up to grip his shirt, her body leaning into the first solid, safe thing she had felt in years. Then, just as quickly, the shame crashed over her. What was she doing? She was a charity case, kissing the Mafia boss who had just handled her problems. She was paying him back. Just like Ty had wanted, she tore her mouth from his, pushing against his chest. No, I can't. Damien let her go instantly. He leaned back, his own breathing ragged, his dark eyes searching her face. He saw the confusion, the self-loathing, the fresh wave of tears. I'm not, she stammered, shaking her head. I'm not paying you. I can't. His expression hardened, but not with anger, with a deep, profound understanding that broke her heart. He stood up, putting a safe distance between them. He ran a hand through his hair, a rare sign of discomposure. Haley, he said, his voice rough. He waited until she met his eyes. I won't take what you're not ready to give. He turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her alone with her burned hand, the smell of scorched bread, and the lingering taste of whiskey on her lips. That night, Haley lay in the enormous empty bed. She was safe. The door was locked. The city glittered outside her window. But she did not sleep. She tossed in the cream-colored sheets, her skin still humming from his touch. She thought about the hard line of his mouth and the unexpected gentleness in his hands. She thought about his voice. I won't take what you're not ready to give. He had not taken. He had not demanded. He had let her go. For the first time in her life, Haley Trent realized she was not afraid of the monster in the dark. She was terrified of the one who had just shown her kindness. And for the first time in years, surrounded by the power of a man who dealt in violence, she finally, impossibly, felt safe. After that night, the penthouse grew smaller. Damien was a ghost. He left before she woke, returned long after she had retreated to her room, but his presence was everywhere. He had been true to his word. The threats had been handled. There were no more calls, no strange cars. The antique shop was closed indefinitely for renovations, and Haley was. Once again, without a purpose, she knew he was working. Luca was a frequent, quiet presence, appearing in the study for hushed, intense meetings with Damien. She would catch snippets of their conversations. Fletcher Street, Ty Callan territory, disrespect. Damien was investigating. He was dismantling her past, piece by piece, from a distance, without ever speaking of it. He had a team tracking Ty Callan's movements, another digging into the Fletcher Street Cruise network. They were rogue, Damien learned, small-time predators acting without the sanction of any major family, which made them both unpredictable and, to him, disposable. For a week, Haley lived in a state of suspended animation. She read books from his vast, unread-looking library. She watched the city move below, a silent film of a life she was no longer part of. She cooked meals in the sterile kitchen, and he would eat them late at night, after she was asleep. She knew because the plates were always clean in the dishwasher the next morning. The silence, the waiting, the sheer passivity of her existence began to grate on her. She felt like a bird in a diamond cage. The kiss, that night in the kitchen, hung between them, a silent, unacknowledged charge. She had pulled away, and he had respected it. He had respected it so completely that he now barely looked at her. The distance was worse than the tension. Finally, she snapped. She found him in the study one afternoon, staring at a map of Oakmoor's industrial district, a red circle drawn around a block of warehouses. I need to go out, she said. He did not turn. It's not safe. I need to go to a pharmacy. I need things. Just personal things. The lie felt clumsy on her tongue, but the truth, I am going insane in here, felt ungrateful. Give Luca a list. He'll have someone fetch it. No. Her voice was sharp. surprising them both. He turned, his dark eyes assessing her. She was wearing his old t-shirt and the gray sweatpants, her hair in a messy knot, her bandaged hand finally healing. "I am not your prisoner. Damien, I am not a pet. I need to walk. I need to buy my own damn toothpaste. Just one block, one store, with your men, please." He studied her for a long time. He saw the desperation in her eyes, the stubborn set of her jaw. He was trying to protect her, but he was suffocating her. He nodded. "Once. 1 hour. The pharmacy on Arbor Street. It's in my territory. My men will be on you. You do not deviate from the path. You do not talk to anyone. Thank you." She breathed, the relief so potent it made her dizzy. 20 minutes later, she was on the street. It felt strange, the pavement under her own sneakers. The air was cold and sharp, smelling of exhaust and roasted nuts from a street vendor. 2 of Damien's men, dressed in unassuming dark jackets, followed her at a discreet distance, 1 in front, 1 behind. She felt like she could breathe again. She went into the pharmacy, her steps light. She walked the aisles, picking up toothpaste, a new hairbrush, a bottle of shampoo. It was the most normal she had felt in months. She paid in cash, part of the salary Damien had insisted on giving her, and stepped back out onto the sidewalk. The street was busy. People bustled past, heads down, collars up. Her guards were in place. The one in front was scanning the intersection. The one behind was pretending to read a newspaper by the door. She was safe. It happened in the space between one breath and the next. A dark green sedan with blacked-out windows. One she had seen circling the block, slowed as it approached her. She didn't even have time to register the danger before the back window slid down. She saw a flash of metal, a glint of sunlight on a barrel. Her forward guard shouted, "Haley, down!" He lunged for her, shoving her hard toward the brick wall of the pharmacy. The sound was not a bang. It was a sharp, flat crack that echoed off the buildings, followed by the sound of glass shattering. A hot, searing pain tore through her left shoulder, like a lit match being pressed into her skin. She screamed, collapsing against the wall as her guard returned fire. The green sedan squealed its tires, accelerating through the red light and disappeared into traffic. Everything went silent for a moment, the world narrowing to a high-pitched ringing in her ears. "Miss Trent, are you hit?" She looked down. There was a hole in her new coat, and beneath it, blood. It was dark, soaking the fabric, and it was spreading. I think so," she whispered, her legs giving out. The guard was on his radio, his voice a calm, urgent series of codes. "Angel is hit, I repeat. Angel is hit, grazed, upper shoulder, need extraction, Arbor Street, now." Angel. They had a code name for her. The other guard was pressing a handkerchief to her shoulder, applying pressure. "You're okay, miss. It's high. It looks like it just clipped you." But she was already fading, the shock and the cold turning the world a fuzzy, distant gray. The last thing she saw before she blacked out was a familiar black sedan mounting the curb, and Damien Rocco leaping from the passenger side, his face a mask of apocalyptic fury. When she woke, she was back in the penthouse, not in the guest room. She was in his bed, in his room. It was darker, simpler than the rest of the apartment, smelling of him, that scent of ironed cotton, old books, and something faintly spicy. Her coat and sweater were gone. She was in her t-shirt, and her shoulder was professionally, tightly bandaged. "You're awake!" Damien was sitting in a leather armchair in the corner of the room, illuminated by a single low lamp. He looked like he had not moved in hours. He had not slept. His face was pale. His jaw set so tightly it looked carved from stone. "What happened?" she whispered. Her shoulder ached, a deep, throbbing burn. "You were shot," he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. It was a cold, flat statement of fact. "A drive-by. The bullet grazed you. You're lucky. Another inch to the right and it would have shattered your clavicle." She remembered the green car, the flash of the gun. "Ty?" "The Fletcher Street crew," he corrected her. "A message. To me. Not you. You were just the delivery system." She tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness and pain made her gasp. He was at her side in an instant, his hands on her good shoulder, easing her back down. His touch was firm, but his anger radiated off him in palpable waves. "Don't move," he commanded. "The doctor gave you a sedative. You lost some blood." "Damien, I'm sorry. Sorry." His voice was low, dangerous. "You're sorry." He backed away from the bed, running a hand over his face. "This is done. It's over." "What's over?" "This. You. Leaving. You. Running errands. You. Walking around with a target on your back." He turned to face her, his eyes black holes of contained rage. "From now on, you do not leave this apartment. You do not go anywhere without me. Not with my men. With me. You are not to open the door. You are not to go onto the terrace. You will stay here, where I can see you, until I have finished this." The words hit her like a slap. The fear, the pain, and the weeks of caged helplessness coalesced into a sudden, white-hot fury of her own. "Until you've finished?" she shot back, pushing herself up on her good elbow, ignoring the pain. "And what if you don't? What if this is just my life now? Your prisoner, your protected little pet, locked in a tower. Is that it?" "It's better than you being dead in an alley," he roared, his control finally snapping. "Is it?" she cried, her voice breaking. "You think you're the first man to try and lock me up for my own good? You think you're different from Ty, from Sal, from any of them. They all wanted to control me, to keep me safe, to keep me quiet, to keep me theirs. You're just doing it with better furniture." The accusation hung in the air, vibrating. Damien's face went white. The rage vanished, extinguished, replaced by a coldness so profound it was terrifying. He looked at her as if she were a stranger who had just gutted him. He walked to the door. "My doctor will be back in the morning to change your dressing. You can move back to the guest room when you feel strong enough." He was leaving. He was dismissing her. After all this, he was walking away. "So that's it," she called out, her voice trembling with a desperate, new pain. "You're just going to—" "What? Write me off. Put me back in the other room and forget about it." He stopped, his hand on the doorknob, his back to her. "What do you want me to say? Haley?" His voice was rough, defeated. "You want me to say I was wrong to protect you? I want you to stop treating me like a problem," she sobbed. "I'm a person. I am a person, and I am so tired of being treated like something to be handled, or locked away, or fixed." He turned around, very slowly. The coldness in his eyes was gone, replaced by a raw, naked vulnerability she had never seen. He looked exhausted. He looked broken. "A problem?" he said, his voice barely a whisper. He walked back to the bed, sinking down to sit on the edge. He didn't look at her. He looked at his own hands, clasped between his knees. "You're not a problem, Haley." He took a deep breath. "The night I found you, you were broken. I recognized it. Because I'm broken, I saw your shadows, and they looked just like mine." He finally lifted his head, his gaze meeting hers. The intensity in his eyes was almost too much to bear. "I am cold," he admitted. "I am what I am. I control things because if I don't, people get hurt. I tried to control this. I tried to keep you separate from it, and I failed. You got shot. Damien, you matter." She stopped. "What? That's why I'm like this." He motioned to his own rigid posture. "It's not about control. It's not about possession. It's you matter. That's all. And I almost just got you killed." The confession, so simple, so raw, shattered the last of her defenses. He wasn't angry at her. He was terrified for her. He wasn't trying to possess her. He was trying to protect her, the only way he knew how. The emotional tension, the fear, the pain, the weeks of unspoken gratitude and simmering attraction, it all broke. Before she was even aware of moving, she had surged forward, ignoring the fire in her shoulder, her good hand tangling in the front of his shirt. She pulled him toward her and crushed her mouth to his. It was a desperate, messy, vulnerable kiss. It was not gentle. Like the one in the kitchen, this was a claiming. It was a drowning woman taking her first breath. It was all her fear, all her loneliness, All her stubborn, broken pride poured into one desperate act. Damien froze for a single second, stunned. Then, his hand came up to her face, his fingers splaying through her hair, his other arm wrapping around her waist, holding her, supporting her. He kissed her back with a depth of feeling that stole the air from her lungs. He broke the kiss, only to murmur against her lips, "Haley, your shoulder. You're hurt." "I don't care," she breathed, and kissed him again, pulling him down. He eased her back against the pillows, his body half covering hers, his weight a profound, grounding comfort. His hands were careful, one tracing the line of her jaw, the other settled on her waist, his touch electric on her skin. Even through the t-shirt, he was a man of absolute control, but she could feel the tremor in his hands. He was holding back. He was letting her lead. She fumbled with the buttons of his shirt, her fingers clumsy. He caught her hand, kissed her knuckles, and then undid the buttons himself, his eyes never leaving hers. He shed the shirt, and the darkness of the room was stark against the muscled lines of his chest and the intricate tattoos that snaked over his shoulders and down his arms. It was all hard lines and coiled strength, and yet, as he looked at her, his expression was one of pure, unadulterated tenderness. This was not a mafia boss. This was just Damien. He slowly, carefully, eased the t-shirt over her head, taking infinite care with her injured shoulder. The cool air of the room hit her skin, and she shivered. He pulled the comforter up, covering them both, creating a warm, private world. For a long time, he just looked at her, his gaze tracing her features, his thumb brushing her cheek. He was shedding his own armor, the steel in his eyes melting away, leaving only the man. "You're sure?" he whispered, his voice thick. She didn't answer with words. She just lifted her good hand, placing her palm flat against his heart. She felt it thundering against her skin, a rhythm that matched her own. He lowered his head, and his mouth found the hollow of her throat, his touch careful, his lips warm. It was a slow, reverent exploration. His hands, those strong, calloused hands that had held a gun and tended her burn, moved over her, not with demand, but with a deep, aching question. She trembled, not from fear, but from the overwhelming, terrifying relief of being seen, of being wanted. This was not passion born of rage. It was passion born of desperation, of two broken, lonely people finding a moment of silence in the storm. It was a shedding of skin, a silent, mutual surrender. It was the slide of his hand over her hip, the gasp she gave when his mouth returned to hers, the strength in his arms as he held her close, as if he could absorb her pain into himself. It was the feeling of his skin against hers, a profound comfort that eclipsed everything else. After, in the quiet darkness, she did what she had not allowed herself to do. She cried. The tears were silent, a hot, steady stream of released fear, of loneliness, of the sheer, crushing weight of the last few years. Damien didn't speak. He just pulled her against his chest, her back to his front, his arm wrapped securely around her waist, his chin resting on the top of her head. He held her tightly, protectively, as the shudders racked her body. He just held her, a solid, warm presence in the dark. "You don't have to be strong with me. Mia cara," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion, his lips against her hair. "Not anymore. I've got you." And she let go. The next morning, she woke up alone. The bed was warm, the imprint of his body still beside her. The sun was streaming in. Her shoulder throbbed, a dull reminder of the day before, but the terror was gone. She found a fresh set of clothes laid out for her, another t-shirt, soft sweatpants, her own. She realized, with a jolt, that Damien must have had someone clear out her entire apartment. When she emerged, the penthouse was quiet. Damien was gone. Luca Barone was in the kitchen and sipping an espresso, looking as sharp and composed as ever. "Good morning," he said, his eyes scanning her. He noted the fresh bandages, the t-shirt that was clearly Damien's, the new softness in her expression. "He left about an hour ago. Business." "Oh," Haley said, disappointed. Is he confronting them, the Fletcher crew?" Luca took a slow sip. "He's attending to a family matter." He set the cup down. He didn't tell you, did he? Of course not. He thinks he's protecting you. Protecting me from what? Luca gave her a look, a mix of pity and sharp warning. Haley, you need to be careful. I know, the Fletcher crew is dangerous. I'm not talking about them. Luca interrupted, his voice low. I'm talking about him. I'm talking about his heart. Haley stared at him. You think he's cold, Luca said. And you're right, he is. He built this entire fortress. He gestured to the penthouse, around himself. He built it for a reason. Damien doesn't let people in. I told you that. Ever. He leaned in, his voice dropping. The last person he loved, his younger brother, was killed 8 years ago. A car bomb meant for Damien. It didn't just break Damien. It hollowed him out. He doesn't survive loss. Haley, he just calcifies. He picked up his cup. He let you in. Last night, he didn't just let you into his bed. He let you past the walls. And right now, he's out there starting a war he was trying to avoid. All because they touched you. Luca looked her straight in the eye. He's not protecting you from them. Haley, he's trying to protect you from what he is. And he's protecting himself from what you're becoming to him. So, you want my advice? Be careful. Because if you break him, you'll be breaking the last part of him that's still human. He left her standing alone in the kitchen, the sunlight suddenly feeling cold. Luca's words echoed in her head. He doesn't survive loss. She touched her own lips, the memory of Damien's kiss, of his touch, still vivid. She had spent her entire life trying to survive, trying to be strong, and now, for the first time, she was terrified. She was terrified of what she was starting to feel. It was not just safety. It was not just gratitude. It was hope. It was the terrifying, agonizing, and undeniable hope of being loved, and she wasn't sure if either of them would survive it. For 2 weeks, the city held its breath. Damien moved. He did not move like a man. He moved like a weather system. The night after the shooting, Haley, drifting on painkillers in his bed, heard the chime of the elevator at 4 a.m. She heard him enter his own bathroom, the sound of the shower running for a very long time. When he emerged, wrapped in a towel, she pretended to be asleep. She smelled it on his skin, beneath the soap, gasoline, and ash. The next morning, it was the lead story on the local news. A massive 5-alarm fire had engulfed a warehouse in the Fletcher Street district. The fire department was calling the cause suspicious, citing evidence of accelerants and disabled fire suppression systems. The warehouse, the reporter noted, was a known front for illegal gambling and loan sharking operations. Haley watched the smoldering ruins on the 80-inch television, her stomach twisting. Damien sat across the room, drinking coffee, his face impassive. "That was you," she whispered, her throat dry. He didn't look away from the screen. "That was a message. They fired a bullet. I returned it." "You burned it down." "I burned it down," he corrected her, his voice cold. "A building, not the men inside. They were given a warning, 10 minutes to clear out." He finally looked at her, his eyes dark and flat. "The next time I will not be so generous. This is the only language men like that understand. It is over. You are safe." But it was not over. And she was not safe. She was a prisoner in his fortress, her shoulder healing, her mind reeling. Luca's warning echoed in her ears. He doesn't survive loss. Damien was suffocatingly protective. He worked from the penthouse, his meetings confined to the study. He had her food delivered. He bought her books, clothes, anything she could possibly need, all in an effort to keep her from stepping 1 foot outside the elevator. He slept in his own bed now, beside her, but the intimacy they had shared was gone, replaced by a tense, vigilant guard. He would hold her, but it felt less like an embrace and more like an anchor, keeping her tied to him, to safety. She hated it. And she hated that. Deep down, it made her feel cherished. The retaliation came exactly 1 week later. It did not come with a bang. It came in a simple, brown cardboard box, delivered by a courier who had no idea what he was carrying. Luca received it at the elevator, his signature standard procedure. Haley was in the kitchen, trying to feel useful by making pasta. When she heard Luca call Damien's name, his voice was different. It lacked its usual smooth, easy cadence. It was sharp, urgent. She crept out of the kitchen. Damien was walking from the study. Luca stood by the foyer table, holding a single, crumpled piece of paper. The box was open at his feet. "When did this arrive?" Damien's voice was a low growl. 2 minutes ago, Luca said. "The courier is being detained in the lobby." "What is it?" Haley asked, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Neither man looked at her. "It's nothing, Haley," Damien said, his back to her. "Go back to the kitchen." "What's in the box?" she insisted, walking closer. "Haley." It was a warning, but she had already seen it. Luca tried to cover it, but it was too late. Spilling from the box was a familiar, stained polyester, a blue and white checkered uniform, identical to the one she used to wear, and on top of it, a photograph. It was Rita, the young, nervous girl from the diner, the one Haley had defended when Sal had cornered her by the dishwasher. In the photo, Rita was crying, her hands bound, a dark bruise on her cheek. Tucked into the folds of the uniform was a note, scrawled in thick, black marker. Haley didn't have to read it. Damien's face told her everything. He had gone pale, his fury so potent it seemed to suck the air from the room. "Get out," he said to Haley, his voice lethally quiet. "No," she said, her voice shaking. "Who is that?" That's Rita. From the diner. What happened to her?" Damien turned to her. And the man she had made love to was gone. The boss was in his place. "This does not concern you." "The hell it doesn't," she cried, shoving at his arm. It was like hitting marble. "That girl is innocent." "What does the note say?" "Damien?" Luca, seeing the inevitable, simply handed the note to his boss. Damien read it aloud, his voice dripping with venom. "Tell your little charity case she's next." Haley's knees buckled. "Oh my God, Ty, this is Ty." "He signed his death warrant," Damien said. He looked at Luca. "Find him. I don't care what it takes. Burn the entire Fletcher district to the ground. I want him. We're already looking," Luca said. "He's deep. He's scared. This is a last, desperate move." "He's holding her at the old shipyard," Damien said, his mind already working. "Warehouse 12. It's the only Fletcher property we haven't touched. He thinks it's neutral ground." "Boss, it's a trap," Luca said. "He wants you. He's using the girl as bait." "Then he'll get me." Damien was already walking toward his room, the one where he kept his safe. Haley ran after him. "What are you doing? You're just going to go." "You can't. I am going to end this." "You are going to stay here. You will lock the door, and you will not open it for anyone but me. Do you understand?" "No, I don't understand." She grabbed his arm, her grip desperate. "Damien, you can't. He's doing this because of me. That girl is tied up in a warehouse because I was nice to her one time, because Ty knows it will hurt me. And that," Damien said, shrugging on a black jacket that concealed the shoulder holster he now wore, "is exactly why you are staying here." "No." Her voice was quiet, but it was steel. "I'm not going to hide in your penthouse while another woman suffers for my past. I am not going to be the reason an innocent person gets hurt. I am not. This is not a negotiation. Haley." "I know," she said, her chin high, her eyes meeting his. She was terrified, but she was resolute. "So you have 2 choices. You can lock me in here, and I will find a way out. I will break a window. I will scream until the neighbors call the police. I will do something to get out. Or, you can take me with you. I won't be in the way. But I am not staying here." Damien stared at her. He saw the stubborn, foolish, magnificent pride that had drawn him to her in the first place. He saw the woman who had shoved her manager, who had refused his ride, who had kissed him with desperate strength. She would not break. He was trapped. If he left her, she would do something reckless. If he took her, he was putting the one thing he cared about in the line of fire. "Damien," she whispered, her voice softening. "I can't. Please, don't make me be a coward." He closed his eyes, a flicker of profound pain crossing his features. Luca was right. He was hollowed out. And this woman, this stubborn, broken woman, was the only thing that had taken root in the ashes. "Luca!" Damien barked, not looking at her. Luca was at the door. "Boss, get her a vest." "She stays in the car, on watch only, one man with her, doors locked. If so much as a shadow moves, you get her out. Understood?" "Boss, I advise against—" "Understood," Damien roared. Luca nodded, his face grim. "Understood." Damien turned back to Haley. His hands came up and gripped her shoulders, his fingers digging in. "You will do exactly as I say. You will not move. You will not speak. You will not breathe without my permission. This is not a game. Haley, these are not men. They are rabid dogs. Am I clear?" "Clear," she whispered, her heart hammering. He looked at her for a long second, then his gaze softened. He leaned in and pressed his forehead against hers. A moment of agonizing, silent connection. "I get you back here, safe. That is all that matters." Then he let her go, and the coldness returned. He walked to the foyer, where he kept his private armory. He opened a locked drawer and took out the small, black Sig Sauer pistol, the one from the first night. He pressed it into her hand. The metal was cold. "I know you know how to use this," he said, his voice flat. "I hope to God you don't have to." The ride to the shipyard was silent and fast. Haley sat in the back of an armored black SUV, flanked by Damien. Luca and 3 other men, all dressed in dark, functional gear, were in a second vehicle behind them. The bulletproof vest was tight and suffocating under her sweater. The gun was a heavy weight in her coat pocket, her hand wrapped around the grip. The shipyard was a graveyard of rusted skeletons. Warehouses loomed like hollowed-out giants against the gray, polluted sky. Damien's plan was what he called quiet extraction. Luca and 2 men would enter through a compromised skylight. Damien would enter from the ground, drawing any guards. Their goal was Rita. Ty was secondary. "You stay here," Damien ordered, his hand on the door. He looked at the man in the driver's seat. "Anything. You drive." The man nodded. Damien looked at Haley one last time. His face was a mask of stone. He got out of the car, melting into the shadows with his team. Haley was left in the crushing silence, her breath fogging the window. The driver, a man named Marco, the same bouncer from the club, she now realized, reassigned after his first failure, sat staring at the warehouse, his hands on the wheel. They waited. 5 minutes. 10. Every shadow seemed to move. Then she heard a sound. Not a gunshot, a scraping. On her right, she turned. A face was pressed against her window. It was Ty Callan. He was smiling, his teeth yellow in the gloom. He tapped on the bulletproof glass with the barrel of a revolver. "Marco, get us out of here," Haley yelled. Marco cursed, turning the key in the ignition. It was too late. The back door of the warehouse rolled up, and a beat-up pickup truck slammed into the side of the SUV, pinning it. The impact threw Haley against the door, rattling her teeth. Ty was at her window, laughing. "You think my boss is in there? You think I'm that stupid? He's in there." He tapped his own head. "The bait wasn't for Rocco. The bait was for you, baby." Another man was at Marco's window with a sledgehammer. The first swing shattered the driver's side glass, which held, but spiderwebbed. Marco drew his weapon, but Ty's man was faster, shoving a shotgun through the hole and firing. Haley screamed as Marco's body slumped over the wheel. The locks on the car, disabled by the shotgun blast, clicked open. Her door was yanked open. "Get out!" Ty snarled, grabbing her by the hair. "No!" she screamed, clawing at him. He dragged her from the vehicle, her feet scraping on the gravel. 2 other men, faces hidden by beanies, fanned out, their guns pointed toward the warehouse. "He's coming!" Haley choked out. "He's going to kill you!" "Let him come!" Ty yelled, shoving her against the side of the SUV. His face was close, his breath hot and sour. "I wanted him to see this. I wanted him to see me take back what's mine. You should never have left me. Haley, you're nothing without me." "Let her go, Ty," one of his men said nervously, looking at the warehouse. "We got her. Let's go." "Not yet." Ty's eyes were fever bright, crazed. He stroked her cheek with the back of his hand, and she recoiled. "He took you. He dressed you up. But you're still just trash. My trash." He grabbed the front of her coat, ripping it open. "What's this? A vest? He put you in armor?" He laughed, a high, thin sound. His man, the nervous one, grabbed her good arm. "Boss, let's just go." He started to pull her. Haley stumbled. Her hand, deep in her pocket, was still wrapped around the cig. You point it at the thing that scares you. This was it. She was not the girl in the apartment. She was not the girl in the alley. The man tugged her again. Harder. "Move!" Haley ripped her arm from his grasp, pulling the gun from her pocket in the same motion. She didn't aim. She just raised it, her hand shaking violently, and pulled the trigger. The sound was deafening. A cannon blast in the enclosed space. It was so much louder than she ever imagined. The recoil slammed her shoulder, sending a fresh bolt of fire from her wound. The man holding her stopped. He looked down at his chest, at the new, dark hole spreading there. He looked at her, his expression one of pure, blank surprise. Then he fell, collapsing like a puppet with its strings cut. Haley stared at the body, her ears ringing, the smell of gunpowder thick in her throat. Ty froze, his eyes wide. This was not the girl he knew. That single deafening shot was all the signal Damien needed. A high window in the warehouse, 30 feet up, shattered outward. Damien didn't use a door. He landed on the roof of the pickup truck, a dark, avenging shadow. The remaining man turned, raising his shotgun. Damien was faster. 2 shots, precise and economical, silenced him forever. It was just Ty. Ty, seeing the game was over, dropped his own gun and grabbed Haley, pulling her in front of him, his arm a steel bar across her throat. "Don't!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Don't, Rocco! I'll snap her neck!" Damien stood motionless on the truck, his gun level, aimed not at Ty, but at the sliver of space just above his head. He was not angry. He was not panicked. He was absolute zero. "Let her go," Damien said. His voice was not a shout. It was a command. "You'll kill us both. She's all I have." Ty was hyperventilating, his grip tightening, cutting off Haley's air. "She is not yours," Damien said. He fired. The shot did not hit Haley. It didn't hit Ty. It hit the metal grate just behind Ty's head. The bullet ricocheted, and a hot shard of shrapnel sliced across Ty's temple. It was a distraction, not a kill, but it was enough. Ty screamed in pain, his hand flying to his face. His grip on Haley loosened for a fraction of a second. Damien was off the truck. He moved with a speed that was not human. He grabbed Ty by the front of his jacket and slammed him against the side of the SUV, the impact echoing like a drum. Ty's head snapped back. Damien's gun was gone. His hands were not. He hit Ty once. A brutal, bone-crunching blow to the jaw. Ty crumpled, but Damien did not stop. He hauled him up, hitting him again, and it was cold. It was methodical. It was not a fight. It was an execution. "Damien!" Haley screamed, her voice raw. He didn't hear her. His eyes were dead. This was for the bullet in her shoulder. This was for the terror in her eyes. This was for Rita. "Damien, stop!" she cried, grabbing his arm. "You're killing him!" He shoved her off, sending her stumbling back. He raised his fist for the final blow. "Damien, please," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "Don't, not for him, for me. Please, don't do this. Don't become this." Her voice, her plea, finally cut through the red haze. He froze, his fist high, his chest heaving. He looked at her terrified, pleading face. He looked at the smoking gun in her hand. He looked at the monster broken at his feet. Slowly, deliberately. He lowered his hand. He turned away from Ty and grabbed him by the ankle, dragging him a few feet. Then, with a sickening, wet crack, he stomped on Ty's right arm. Ty screamed, a high, thin sound, before passing out from the pain. "He will never hold a gun again," Damien said, his voice ragged. "He will never touch you again." The warehouse door slid open. Luca emerged, supporting a sobbing, terrified Rita. "We're clear," Luca said, and his eyes taking in the scene. The 3 bodies, Ty unconscious, and Haley, standing over the man she shot, the gun still smoking in her hand. "Get her home," Damien ordered, his voice raw. He turned to Haley. He didn't speak. He just walked to her, took the gun from her trembling fingers, and tucked it into his own waistband. Then he shrugged off his own jacket and wrapped it around her, pulling her against his chest, his hand holding the back of her head. He just held her, letting her shiver, her sobs muffled against his shirt. Later that night, they stood on the penthouse terrace. Rita was safe, already on a private plane to a new life in a new city, with enough money to start over. Ty Callan and the remnants of the Fletcher crew were now a problem for the city's sanitation department. It was over. Haley stood in the cold night air, wrapped in one of Damien's cashmere blankets. She was staring at the lights, but she was seeing the man's face as he fell. "I killed him," she whispered. "No," Damien said, his voice quiet beside her. He was standing close, but not touching her. "You survived. There is a difference." She turned to him. The city lights were reflected in his dark eyes. He was no longer the monster from the shipyard. He was just Damien. "I've spent my whole life being scared," she said, her voice small. "Running from Ty, from Sal, from the debt. I never thought I would be the one to stop it." "You were always the one," he said. "You just needed someone to hold the line with you." She looked at him, at this powerful, dangerous, and impossibly gentle man who had burned down buildings and spared a life. All for her. "I never thought anyone would fight for me like this," she confessed, the words barely audible over the wind. "I never thought anyone would risk this much. For me." Damien's hand found hers, lacing his fingers through hers. His grip was warm, solid. "I told you," he murmured, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "You matter." He didn't kiss her. He didn't pull her close. He just stood beside her, a silent, solid presence, holding her hand as they looked out over the city that had tried to break them both. And for the first time, the height didn't make her feel dizzy. It made her feel safe. The underworld of Oakmore City operates on a different kind of physics. Power, like a vacuum, abhors a void, and respect is a solid, not a gas. It cannot be compressed. Damien Rocco had upset the balance. By burning the Fletcher warehouse, he had performed a public service, cleaning up a rogue element, but by doing it for a girl, a stray, a nobody, he had committed a cardinal sin. He had shown a variable. He had shown a heart. The whispers started immediately. They slithered from the docks, through the unions, and into the private back rooms of rival families. "He's gone soft." A shipment of his, bound for the coast, was accidentally misrouted. A truce on a construction contract was suddenly renegotiated. Small, subtle tests, mosquitoes stinging a bull, checking to see if it was still strong enough to swat them. Haley saw it all. She saw the new tension in Luca's shoulders. She heard the hushed, angry phone calls Damien took in his study. He was sleeping beside her every night, a warm, solid wall of muscle and quiet breath, but he was more distant than ever. He was busy holding his empire together, and she knew, with a certainty that settled in her stomach like cold lead, that she was the one pulling it apart. She was the crack in his armor. She remembered Luca's words, a prophecy that now haunted her sleep. He doesn't survive loss. She was suffocating in the penthouse, watching the city lights, knowing that men were plotting, sharpening knives, all because of her. He had saved her from Ty Callan, only to deliver her to a new, far more dangerous predator, his own life. She had brought this war to his doorstep. The guilt was a physical weight. It was heavier than the vest, heavier than the gun she had fired. He would not survive losing her. She knew this. He had shown her the hollowed-out places inside him, and she had seen her own reflection. But if she stayed, his rivals would come for her. They would use her to break him, to kill him. She saw the only path. If she was taken from him, he would burn the world. But if she left him, if she disappeared, of her own free will, maybe that was a wound he could survive. It was the only gift she could give him, his life back. She waited until he was deep in a meeting with Luca. The study doors closed, their voices a low, angry rumble. Her hands were shaking. This was running for... She went to his nightstand. She found a sheet of his heavy, cream-colored stationery and his pen. Her hand was so unsteady she could barely form the letters. "Damien, I know you will be angry, but I am doing this because I love you. You were right. You don't survive loss, so I am not letting you lose me. I am leaving. They are coming for you because of me. I am the weakness they see. Without me, you are strong again. This is the only way to protect you. Don't look for me. Please, this is my choice. I am not running from you. I am running for you. Haley. She folded it, her own tears staining the ink. She left it on his pillow, where his head should be. She dressed in the darkest, most anonymous clothes she had, black jeans, a black sweater, the new coat. She took the cash he had insisted she keep, stuffing it into her pockets, and she went to the drawer in her own room. She took the Sig Sauer. This time, she knew exactly how to use it. She slipped down the service elevator, bypassing the security in the main lobby, and disappeared into the anonymous afternoon crowd. She kept her head down, her heart a cold, frantic drum. She walked for 10 blocks, then hailed a cab, her voice small. "The train station, please." Grand Central Station was a cathedral of chaos. It was the perfect place to disappear. Hundreds of people, all moving, all in a hurry, all wrapped in their own worlds. She got in line, her eyes scanning the departure board. Anywhere, north, west, it didn't matter. "One ticket to Chicago," she murmured to the agent, sliding her cash under the glass. She was turning, the ticket clutched in her hand, when a hand like a steel trap closed around her arm. "Going somewhere?" The voice was not a whisper. It was a low, volcanic rumble that vibrated through her entire body. She froze. She didn't have to turn. She knew. Damien. He was not in a suit. He was in the black t-shirt and jeans he had worn to the shipyard, his leather jacket thrown on over them. He must have run from the apartment. His chest was heaving, his face pale with a fury so profound it was terrifying. He wasn't the boss. He was the man. "Damien, please," she whispered, trying to pull away. His grip only tightened, bruising her. "You think you can just leave?" he hissed, his voice drawing stares. He didn't care. He dragged her out of the line, into a less crowded alcove. "I'm trying to save you," she cried, her voice breaking. "Save me?" He actually laughed. A short, ugly sound. "You wrote me a note, like a child. You wrote me a note and you were going to get on a train, with my gun in your pocket, and what? Disappear? They're coming for you, because of me." "I know they're coming for me," he roared, his voice bouncing off the marble. He shoved her back against the wall, his hands slamming on either side of her head, trapping her. He was close, his eyes blazing. "They have always been coming for me. Before you, after you. It is the life I lead. I'm your weakness," she sobbed. "You're my life," he shouted, and the raw confession silenced her. He was trembling, his control completely gone. "You don't get to decide who I protect. You don't get to decide what I'm willing to risk. You don't get to take yourself away from me. That is not your choice to make." "I was so scared," she whispered, the tears flooding. "I can't let you die for me." "And you think this," he snarled, his voice dropping to a ragged whisper. "Living without you, knowing you're out there alone, thinking I let you go. You think that's better than dying?" He looked at her, his anger breaking, revealing the raw, agonizing fear beneath. The same fear she had felt. He dropped his hands, his fight gone. "You broke my one rule, Haley, you ran." The desolation in his voice broke her. "I'm sorry," she wept. "I'm so sorry, Damien." He didn't speak. He just grabbed her hand and pulled her, not back to his car. He was too angry, too shaken to drive. He dragged her out of the station, across the street, and into the lobby of the first hotel he saw. A high-end, anonymous place. He booked a room at the front desk. His voice clipped, his credit card tossed on the counter. He pulled her into the elevator. The silence between them electric, suffocating. He didn't let go of her hand. He shoved the key card into the slot on the 12th floor, pushed her into the room, and slammed the door, locking it. Then he just stood there, his back to the door, breathing like he'd just run a marathon. You can't just..." She started, wiping her face. "What?" he snapped. "I can't what? Stop you from throwing yourself away? Stop you from gutting me? I was doing what I thought was right. You were being a coward," he yelled. "You were running, just like you did from Ty, just like you did from everyone. That's not fair. It's the truth. The one time you have someone in your corner, the one time you're not alone, and you run, because it's easier than staying. It's easier than trusting me to handle it." He stalked across the room, his energy too much for the small space. "You think you're my weakness, Haley? You think my rivals see you and think I'm soft?" He spun on her. "You are the only thing in my entire goddamn life that's real. You are the only thing I have ever had that is mine, and they don't see weakness. They see that I finally have something to lose, and that's what scares them." He was in front of her now, his hands coming up to frame her face, his grip hard, desperate. "I am not losing you, not to them, not to you." He crushed his mouth to hers. It was not a kiss. It was a collision. It was all his anger, all his fear, all his desperate, possessive relief poured into one, bruising act. It was the kiss of a drowning man, and she was his only heir. Haley's hands fisted in his jacket, clinging to him. She kissed him back with all her own desperation, all her guilt, all her love. This was not a surrender. This was an anchor. She was anchoring him. He was anchoring her. He backed her against the wall, his body pressing her into it, his mouth never leaving hers. It was a frantic, punishing kiss that was more honest than any words. He was mapping her, reminding himself she was real, that she was here. His hands were in her hair, at her waist, on her face. "You're mine." He rasped against her lips, but it was not a statement of ownership. It was a plea. "You're mine." "Yours?" she sobbed, her fingers digging into his shoulders. "I'm yours. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Don't you ever," he murmured, his lips tracing her jaw, his breath hot on her skin. "Ever. Run from me again." He unzipped her coat, his hands trembling, and threw it to the floor. The gun in the pocket thudded against the carpet. He didn't care. His hands were on her sweater, his body flush against hers. "I was so scared," she whispered, her hands fumbling with the hem of his t-shirt, needing to feel his skin. "So was I," he admitted, his voice thick. He lifted her, and she wrapped her legs around his waist, clinging to him as he carried her to the bed. He didn't lay her down gently. He fell with her, a tangle of limbs and desperate need. This was not like the first time, born of comfort and tears. This was a fire. It was a fierce, emotional reclaiming. It was his hands, rough and calloused, tracing the line of her hip, her side, as if memorizing her. It was her hands, pressing flat against his chest, feeling the frantic, steady beat of his heart. There was no slowness, no tenderness. It was pure, unadulterated need. It was the frantic slide of clothes, the gasp of skin against skin. It was his lips on her throat, her shoulder, her mouth. It was a desperate, silent conversation. "You are here. I am here. We are real." He held her, his movements deep, possessive, a rhythm that was all about reaffirming, about driving the shadows away. She met him with equal force, her body arching, her hands clinging to his arms. Her eyes locked on his. She saw the control he held so tightly finally, completely, shatter. She saw the man underneath, the man who was just as afraid as she was, and in that moment, in an anonymous hotel room, they confessed everything. Every look, every touch, every desperate breath was an "I love you" afterward. He didn't let her go. He rolled, pulling her on top of him, wrapping his arms around her like a shield, his breathing ragged, his heart thundering against her ear. She lay there, limp, her tears of relief soaking his skin. They lay tangled in the sheets for a long time, the anger and fear finally gone, replaced by a grim, shared resolve. "They think I'm weak," he said finally, his voice a low rumble from his chest. "They think a heart is a liability." Haley lifted her head, looking him in the eyes. "So what do we do?" His gaze hardened. "We show them just how wrong they are. We show them what a man with something to lose is capable of." He brushed the hair from her face. "And this time, you're not hiding in the penthouse. You're not running. You're standing right next to me." The peace meeting was set for 2 days later. Damien had begun consolidating his power, calling in debts, moving assets. He was not preparing for war. He was demonstrating that a war was unwinnable. The meeting was the final move. It was to be at La Notte, a neutral, old-world restaurant. All 5 rival bosses would be there. "You're not going," he said. It was not an order. It was a statement. "Yes, I am," Haley said. She was in his room, watching him fasten his watch. He stopped, looking at her. "Haley, this is not the shipyard. These are not rabid dogs. They are snakes, and you are walking into their pit. They think I'm your weakness," she said, her voice steady. "They think I'm some bimbo you've gone soft over. I need to be there. I need to show them I'm not your liability. I need to show them." She took a breath. "That I am your armor." He stared at her. He saw the woman from the train station, the woman who had fired a gun, the woman who had just fought him and loved him with equal fire. He nodded. Once. He walked to his closet and opened a door she had never seen. Inside, hanging alone, was a single garment bag. "I bought this," he said, his voice quiet. "A few weeks ago, for you." He unzipped it. It was a dress. It was not red or black. It was a deep, steely, gunmetal gray. It was simple, elegant, with long sleeves and a high neckline. It was a dress that did not ask for attention. It commanded respect. "I bought it," he said, his gaze meeting hers, "in case you ever wanted to be seen." An hour later, she walked into the private dining room of La Notte on Damien's arm. The room went silent. 5 men, all older, all in expensive suits, sat around a large circular table. They looked at Damien, and then their eyes slid to her. She could feel their surprise, their contempt, their calculations. Luca, already there, stood, his face a mask of neutrality. "Damien," a man with silver hair and a pleasant smile said, "You're late, and you've brought a guest." This was Vincent Lacruz, the main instigator, the one pushing the soft narrative. "Haley is not a guest," Damien said, his voice like cold steel. He pulled out a chair for her, a move of such old-world, blatant respect that it was a message in itself. "She is my partner." Lacruz's smile widened, but his eyes were cold. A partner, how very modern. He lit a cigar. "We are here to discuss business, Damien, not distractions." The insult was clear. Damien's hand, resting on the table, clenched. Before he could speak, Haley stood up. The room fell silent again. Her heart was a hummingbird in her chest. She was wearing the gray dress. She felt like she was wrapped in steel. She looked directly at Vincent Lacruz. "Mr. Lacruz," she said, her voice clear, not trembling. "You call me a distraction. You're wrong. I am the entire point." The men stared. "You all whisper that Mr. Rocco has gone soft because of me. You mistake his humanity for weakness, and you are fools." She stepped away from the table slightly, so she could see them all. 3 months ago, I was a ghost. I was hunted by men you wouldn't let clean your shoes. I had no one. I had nothing. I ended up on Mr. Rocco's doorstep, a stray, I believe was the word used. She saw a flicker of surprise in their eyes. "Mr. Rocco never asked me for anything," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "He never took anything from me. He gave me a safe room to sleep in. He gave me a gun to protect myself. He gave me a job. And when the men who hunted me came back, he did what none of you would have done. He protected me, not for profit, not for territory, but because it was the right thing to do." She leaned forward, her hands on the back of her chair. "You think this makes him soft? The man who will burn down a warehouse for a stranger, who will declare war on an entire crew for one innocent girl. You think that man is weak? That man is the only one in this city strong enough to be kind." She looked at each of them. "I am not his weakness. I am not his distraction. I am his witness, and I am telling you, you are not testing a man who has gone soft. You are provoking a man who has finally found something he is willing to die for. I ask you, gentlemen, which man is more dangerous?" Silence. Thick. Absolute silence. Damien just watched her, his expression unreadable, but his eyes were full of a raw, burning pride. Vincent LaCruz was the first to move. His smile was gone, replaced by a calculating, appraising look. He studied her, his eyes lingering on her face, her mouth, the line of her throat. It was not a look of lust, it was a look of acquisition. He finally raised his glass. "To Mr. Rocco," he said, his voice smooth as oil, "and to his partner." He took a drink, his cold eyes never leaving Haley's. "It seems we have misjudged the situation," LaCruz said, setting his glass down. "Perhaps. We can return to the subject of that construction contract." Damien leaned back. "Perhaps we can—" The ride back to the penthouse was silent. Haley's adrenaline was gone, leaving her shaking. Damien guided her into the apartment, the city lights welcoming them home. "You did well," he said, his voice quiet. She turned to him in the foyer. "Did it work? Did they believe me?" Damien loosened his tie, his gaze distant, looking out the window at the city he ran. "You made them listen," he said. "You stopped the bleeding, for now." He turned to her, his expression grim. "But it's not over, LaCruz. He didn't just look at you. He saw you. He thinks he's found my new weakness." "Me? No," Damien said, his hand coming up to trace the high neckline of her dress. "My strength. And he's the kind of man who likes to take things that don't belong to him." The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, embossed on cardstock so thick it felt like a weapon. Vincent LaCruz, in a gesture of renewed faith and friendship, was hosting a truce party at his flagship hotel, the Imperial. All 5 families were invited. Damien's presence was, of course, especially requested. Luca Barone, who had been analyzing shipping manifests, looked at the invitation on Damien's desk and snorted. "A truce party? That's original. He's going to try and kill you." "I know," Damien said, not looking up from his laptop. "And we're not going," Luca stated. "We are," Damien said. Luca stopped. "Boss, he's not just testing you. He's declared that meeting was a farce. He saw Haley, he saw you, he thinks he can take you. This is an open invitation to an execution." "It's an open invitation to a consolidation," Damien corrected him, finally closing the laptop. "He wants to put me in a box. I'm going to put him in the ground. He thinks he can do it publicly, humiliate me, and absorb my territory by morning. He's wrong." "And Haley?" Luca asked, his voice low. "She's not staying here. He'll send men for her the second he thinks I'm cornered." Damien stood, walking to the window. "She's safest where I can see her, right next to me. It's a trap. Damien, a sloppy one. That's what makes me nervous. He's arrogant. Arrogant men with nothing to lose are predictable." "Good," Damien said. "I'm counting on it." When Damien told Haley, she simply nodded. The terror that had lived in her veins for months had been cauterized. It was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She was no longer the girl who ran. She was the woman who had stood her ground. "What should I wear?" she asked. Damien looked at her, a long, appraising look. "The gray dress was for them," he said, a slow, dangerous smile touching his lips. "Tonight, I want you to wear red." The Imperial's grand ballroom was a monument to bad taste and old money. Gold leaf dripped from the ceiling, and the chandeliers were so large they looked heavy enough to kill. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the acrid smoke of celebratory cigars. It was a room full of snakes, all dressed in silk. When Damien Rocco walked in, the music seemed to stutter. He was in a perfectly tailored black suit, a shadow of lethal elegance, and on his arm was Haley. She was not the girl in the diner uniform. She was not the woman in the borrowed t-shirt. She was magnificent. The dress was the color of fresh blood, a simple silk sheath that clung to every curve, its neckline high, its back cut daringly low. Her hair was up, and the simple diamond studs he had given her were her only jewelry. She was not a possession. She was a statement. Vincent LaCruz glided toward them, his silver hair immaculate, his smile a rictus. "Damien, and the lovely Haley," he purred. Taking her hand, he bowed to kiss her knuckles, his cold eyes lingering on her. "You are a vision, my dear. Truly. It's hard to believe you were serving coffee just a few months ago. Damien has a true eye for potential. He has an eye for loyalty, Vincent, Haley said, her voice clear and cool, extracting her hand. Something I'm sure you find confusing. LaCruz's smile tightened. Sharp, I see. He found one with claws. He turned to Damien. A drink, my friend. Let us celebrate this new era of peace. We'll see how peaceful it is, Damien said, his hand resting possessively on the small of Haley's back. Luca, his face a mask of neutrality, flanked them, his eyes scanning every waiter, every exit. He was armed. Damien was armed. Even Haley, she suspected, had something small and sharp hidden in her evening bag. For an hour, they played the game. Damien was introduced to LaCruz's allies, men with dead eyes and heavy gold rings. LaCruz was the picture of the gracious host, but his insults were constant, all aimed at Haley. You must be so overwhelmed, my dear, he said, gesturing to the opulent room. A Cinderella story. I've faced worse monsters than a ballroom. Mr. LaCruz, she replied, sipping her water. Tell me, he said, leaning in, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. Does he make you keep the gun he gave you under your pillow? Or does he trust you that much? Damien's hand on her back tightened. Vincent, he warned, I'm simply admiring your investment, LaCruz said, his gaze sliding down her body. A large, thick-necked man in a tuxedo stepped up. Haley recognized him as Franco, LaCruz's chief enforcer. Mrs. Rocco, Franco said, his voice a gravelly sneer. The boss asked me to get you some real champagne. He offered her a flute, but as she reached for it, his other hand came up, brushing her arm, his thick fingers deliberately grazing the side of her breast as he steadied her. It was a blatant, calculated, public humiliation. Haley froze, her breath hitching. The room did not fall silent. It kept buzzing. Damnet! Damien did not move. He did not look at Franco. He looked at LaCruz. Vincent, Damien said, his voice impossibly calm, conversational. Your dog is off his leash. Franco, hearing this, turned. What did you... Damien's hand moved so fast it was a blur. He did not reach for his gun. He picked up his own untouched champagne flute from a nearby table. In one fluid motion, he snapped the stem in his fist. The crack of the glass was louder than a gunshot. He held the jagged, razor-sharp bowl of the flute, blood welling from his own palm. Franco's eyes went wide. Damien pressed the improvised weapon against Franco's thick throat, just hard enough to draw a single drop of blood. You will apologize to the lady, Damien whispered, his voice a sibilant hiss that cut through the music. You will back away. And if you ever, in your entire miserable life, look in her direction again, I will open your throat and let you bleed out on your boss's expensive carpet. The music stopped. The room was frozen. Franco was pale, sweating. I'm sorry. Damien pushed him back, hard. LaCruz laughed, a real barking laugh. Temper, Damien, after all your girl said about your kindness? It seems the leash is short on both sides. It was the signal. From the corners of the room, two men, dressed as waiters, drew weapons. Damien, Luca yelled, shoving Haley toward a service entrance behind them. The first shot was a deafening crack. Luca grunted, stumbling he'd been hit, a spray of red blooming on his thigh. He fell against a dessert cart, but his own gun was already out. Returning fire, Damien had his weapon out, shoving Haley behind him. He fired twice, precise and devastating, dropping one of the gunmen. He grabbed Haley, pushing her toward the door Luca was crawling for. Go! Get to the car! Haley screamed as another bullet sparked off the wall near her head. She was dragging Luca, who was firing cover. Damien was right behind them, a wall of black, using his own body to shield her. They burst through the swinging doors into the hotel kitchen. Chefs and dishwashers screamed, diving for cover. Out the back! Luca yelled, clutching his leg. Damien kicked open the heavy steel door to the loading dock, and they were in the cold night air. The black sedan was parked just where Luca had left it, 50 yards away. Get him in! Damien roared, pushing Haley toward the driver's side. Another man, one of LaCruz's, emerged from the shadows of the loading dock, raising a shotgun. Damien saw him, Haley saw him. Damien didn't hesitate. He shoved Haley hard behind the open car door. "Get down!" He turned, raising his own gun. He fired. The shotgun fired. Both men fell. The shotgun pellets tore through the car's windshield. Damien collapsed against the side of the car, his gun clattering to the pavement. "Damien!" Haley screamed. It was a sound of pure, primal terror. She scrambled to him. He was on the ground, his eyes wide with shock. A dark, spreading stain was soaking the front of his white shirt. He had taken the blast meant for her, straight to the chest. "No. Oh, God, no," she sobbed. Luca was pulling himself into the back seat, groaning. "Go! Haley, go! We have to go!" She grabbed Damien under the arms, adrenaline giving her a strength she did not possess. "You are not leaving me," she screamed at him, at his pale, shocked face. She hauled him into the passenger seat, his body a dead weight. She ran to the driver's side, her red dress hiked up, her hands slick with his blood. She jammed the key in the ignition and stomped on the gas. The car roared to life, fishtailing out of the alley, leaving the chaos of the Imperial behind. "Hold on, Damien," she cried, weaving through traffic, her driving reckless, desperate. "Just hold on. Luca, where is the safe house?" 2 miles. Left on Broad. He grunted from the back, trying to tie a napkin around his bleeding leg. God, Haley, he's bleeding bad." "He's fine," she shrieked, her knuckles white on the wheel. "He's fine. Do you hear me, Damien? You are not allowed to die. I forbid it. You don't get to save me and then leave me." She looked at him. His head was lolled against the window. His eyes were closed. His hand, the one he had cut on the glass, was resting, palm up, on his lap. "Damien?" she whispered. "Damien, answer me." He didn't move. His chest was not rising. "No," she sobbed. "No, no, no." She pulled the car, screeching, into the alley behind a quiet, dark bakery. This was it, the safe house Luca had shown her on a map. She threw the car into park and leaped out, pulling his door open. "Luca, help me, together." They dragged him from the car, up a narrow flight of stairs, and into the small, clean apartment above the shop. They got him onto the floor, onto the cheap linoleum of the kitchen. "The medkit is under the sink," Luca yelled, collapsing against the wall, his own face pale. Haley tore the cabinet open. She found the professional-grade trauma bag. She ripped it open, her hands shaking so violently she could barely hold the shears. "Damien, I'm here," she whispered, cutting away his blood-soaked shirt. The sight made her choke. His chest. It was a mess. The vest he had been wearing, thin and concealable under his suit, had stopped the worst of it. But it was not rated for a close-range shotgun. 2 pellets had gotten through, one in his shoulder, one low, in his side. But he was so pale. He was so still. "He's not breathing," Luca said, his voice hollow. "He's breathing," Haley yelled. She put her ear to his mouth. "Nothing." She put her fingers on his neck. "Nothing." "No," she said. She placed her hands, one over the other, on his sternum. "You don't get to leave." She began compressions, pushing, sobbing, a ragged, ugly count. 1, 2, 3, 4. "Don't you leave me." Luca was on the phone, his voice weak. I need a medic. Now. My location, yes, it's him." "Damien, please," Haley begged, her arms aching. "Please, I love you. Wake up, wake up." She leaned down, breathing into his mouth. She tasted his blood. She pressed on his chest again. Nothing, he was gone. He had flatlined. She collapsed on him, her head on his still chest, a wail of pure, animalistic grief tearing from her throat. "You promised," she wept. "You promised." A gasp, a huge, shuddering, ragged intake of air. Haley's head snapped up. Damien's eyes were open. They were wide, unfocused, staring at the ceiling. He coughed, a wet, rattling sound. He turned his head, his gaze finding her. He was back. He was there. His hand, the one he had cut, slowly lifted. He fumbled, his fingers weak, but he managed to clutch the front of her dress. He grabbed a handful of the blood-red fabric. His eyes, hazy with pain, locked on hers. He was anchoring himself, holding on to the only real thing in the void. You're Mine? He whispered, his voice a ragged breath, and then his eyes rolled back, and he was unconscious. But he was breathing. Weeks later, the city was quiet. Damien was healing. He was sitting on the terrace of the penthouse, a thick cashmere blanket over his legs, a glass of water in his hand. The scar on his side was puckered and new, but his color was back. The Rocco Syndicate was stronger than ever. While Damien healed, Luca, walking with a new, very slight, and very permanent limp, had orchestrated a retaliation so swift and so silent it was spoken of in whispers. LaCruz's entire organization had been absorbed, his assets frozen, his lieutenants either flipped or retired. Vincent LaCruz himself had simply vanished. No one ever found a body. No one ever looked. The message was clear. You do not touch the Rocco family. You do not touch her. Haley was not on the terrace. She was downtown, in a beautifully refurbished brownstone. The sign on the brass plaque was simple. The Trent Center, a trauma recovery center for women. Damien had opened it in her name, a legal, legitimate business. It was her passion. She spent her days working with women who had been hunted, who had been hurt, who had, like her, been left with no one to call. She was giving them a safe room, legal aid, a new start. She was not just a survivor, she was a savior. That night, she came home late, tired, but with a new light in her eyes. She found Damien in their bed, reading a book. The silence in the penthouse was no longer cold. It was warm. It was real. She slipped out of her clothes and slid into the sheets beside him. He put the book down, his arm coming around her, pulling her close. She rested her head on his chest, right over his heart. She listened to the slow, steady, strong beat. She was safe. They lay in the quiet darkness, the city glittering below, 1,000,000 miles away. I used to have no one left to call, Haley whispered, her voice soft against his skin. Damien was quiet for a long moment. He took her hand, the one resting on his chest. He lifted it, turned it over, and pressed her palm flat, right over his heart. He held it there, his own hand covering hers. Now, he murmured, his lips brushing her hair. You just have to call me. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We hope you enjoyed the journey. We would love to know where you are listening from, so please drop a comment and say hello for more stories like this. Be sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories, and please share your thoughts on this tale in English. We read everyone.